We move on now to item 6 of our agenda concerning voluntary supplementary contributions to the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund. Allow me to remind you that the committee has two main tasks as regards the management of the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund. The first task for the committee is to propose a biennial plan for the use of the resources of the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund for the approval by the General Assembly. And in fact, this is what we will do under item 7. This plan only applies to assessed contributions paid by state parties under Article 26 of the Convention. The second responsibility for the committee concerns the approval of voluntary supplementary contributions. They are contributions made by state parties in addition to their assessed contributions for the implementation of activities that cannot be supported with the resources of UNESCO's regular budget. Since UNESCO has been facing particularly difficult financial situations, such voluntary supplementary contributions have been very important for the implementation of our convention. I now leave the floor to Mr. Curtis so that he can present this item to us in detail.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. As many of you will know, the financial structure of the 2003 convention is rather complex. Before moving ahead, I'd like to remind you and underline that the reporting period for this item on voluntary supplementary contribution is from the 11th session of the committee last year until October of this year. As a background, to remind you that at its ninth session, the committee approved the concept note for 2014 till 2017 under the former structure of the complementary additional program entitled Strengthening Capacities to Safeguard Intangible Cultural Heritage for Sustainable Development. That was decision 9-7. This relates, of course, to the Global Capacity Building Program initiated and delivered by the Secretariat, which I reported on earlier. Now, this concept note will expire at the end of this year, at the end of next month. So by approving this concept note, the committee accepted voluntary supplementary contributions made to support capacity building activities between two committee sessions and authorized the Secretariat to make immediate use of such contributions. Under this reporting period, the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund has not been benefited from any contribution to support the capacity building program. However, I do have some good news. The Secretariat received a confirmation on November 20 of a contribution made by the Netherlands, which will allow the continuation of the capacity building project in the Dutch Caribbean islands and Suriname. We are thankful for this support, and this contribution will be included in the report for the next session. Under the reporting period, there were two earmarked contributions that are not related to the capacity building program, and they are reflected in Annex 1. Firstly, $300,000 United States from the Cultural Heritage Administration of the Republic of Korea to improve the periodic reporting mechanism under the Convention. Secondly, $100,000 United States from the People's Republic of China to organize the open-ended Intergovernmental Working Group on developing an overall results framework for the Convention, which was held successfully in Jeju in June 2017. So please allow me to give more explanation about Annex 1. The information provided here responds to a 9-com request to be informed of all voluntary support given to the Convention during the reporting period, whether channeled or not through the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund. This is why this annex includes information concerning voluntary supplementary contributions to the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund to carry out specific earmarked activities, as well as contributions to the sub-fund of Intangible Cultural Heritage, of the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund for enhancing the human capacities of the Secretariat, which was established by the General Assembly. The Annex also includes information about new projects approved under the established funds in trust, as well as loans and secondments of personnel. In the recent past, the main funding requirements for implementing the Convention has concentrated on extending the reach and effectiveness of the global capacity building program and strengthening the human resources of the Secretariat. I would like to take this opportunity to explain the evolution of the resources mobilized in this regard by referring to two graphs included in the working document. These graphs collect data for the last two biennia and the current biennium. Regarding the support of the global capacity building program, the graph shows a decline since 2012. Shows a steep decline since 2012, which comes down to its lowest point this current biennium. The mobilized resource reached only 56% of the 3 million biennial objective set by the committee at its 9th session. Support to the Convention through funds and trust arrangements remained stable during the last 3 biennia, thanks to the generous contributions aiming to strengthen national capacity in different regions of the world. 7 Southern African countries benefited from support given by the government of Flanders in Belgium. 5 countries in Asia Pacific receives funds from Japan to undertake the second phase of capacity building activities. And 4 countries in the Arab states have received support from the Abu Dhabi Tourism and Culture Authority in the United Arab Emirates. While we are grateful for these generous contributions, we do take note of a decline in the amount of contributions from some of the regular donors. However, the overall decline showed in the graph is explained by the critical decrease in contributions made by state parties through earmarked contributions to the fund. During the reporting period, only $110,000 were received from the government of the Netherlands in support of capacity building. This was the contribution that was reported to the 11Com, and this does not include the most recent contribution I've just mentioned, which is out of the reporting period. So in a nutshell, the flow of contributions is very unstable, with a general trend showing the amount of contribution is declining. So what are the implications of this situation for the Convention? It simply means that it will be difficult to guarantee a satisfactory level of support for national safeguarding efforts through our capacity building program. More concretely, the Secretariat has identified that at least 41 countries could meaningfully benefit from capacity building support, but they could not be supported because of the lack of contributions. They were identified either through needs assessments, external evaluations, or through direct requests made by states. Of the 41, 19 are in Africa. The situation is no way better concerning the support, of course, to the human resources to this fund for the human resources of the Secretariat, which has never reached the target which was sent by the General Assembly of 1.1 million United States dollars, but neither has it ever been at such a low level since it was established in 2010. Since the 11Com, the sub-fund received voluntary contributions totaling $22,408 from Monaco, meaning a decrease of 70% in relation of the 2 previous biennia. So essentially, there is no money left in the sub-fund for human resources set up in 2010. Of course, this decrease is especially important given that many of the mechanisms we've discussed are increasing, and this has been discussed earlier in the report. So in light of the expiration of the 2014-2017 complementary additional program, the Secretariat is bringing to the Committee for approval in Annex 2 2 new funding priorities for the period of 2018 to 2021. These new funding priorities are built in line with UNESCO's new integrated budget framework that sets out the organization's overall funding requirements for the next exercise, the 39C5. The first funding priority seeks to continue efforts to extend the reach and effectiveness of the global capacity building strategy with a target of $5 million, while the second aims at initiating efforts to incorporate intangible cultural heritage into formal and non-formal education in cooperation with the education sector with a target of $2 million. In line with the decision taken by the Committee for the Concept Note for 2014-2017, which was Decision 9-7, if approved, any voluntary supplementary contributions received between two committee sessions within the scope of these two funding priorities will be considered accepted by the committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for your very clear presentation. It seems to me that the situation presented by the Secretary is extremely worrying and deserves the attention not only of the committee, but more generally of all state parties. Therefore, I'd also like to express my gratitude to those who provided their support to the Convention and its Secretariat since our last session, namely the Abu Dhabi Tourism and Culture Authority, Japan, the People's Republic of China, the Principality of Monaco, and the Republic of Korea. It is also an excellent piece of news that the Netherlands is getting ready to make an additional contribution to the fund so that a capacity building project in the Dutch Caribbean islands and Suriname can go on. I would like also to thank the Secretariat for all their work during this biennium, being able to comply with increasing obligations, maintaining a high-quality standard, even though contributions to vital tools as the sub-fund dropped by 70%, as already presented by our Secretary. I now open the floor. Does anybody wish to take the floor? No. I see Turkey and Côte d'Ivoire. The first distinguished delegate of Turkey. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We thank the Secretariat for the report before us. Unfortunately, as just been presented by Mr. Curtis, the voluntary supplementary contribution situation is not very promising. While global capacity building program has been crucial for the implementation of the convention, unfortunately, the extra budgetary funding had been in constant decline, as a result of which the Secretariat could no longer be able to deliver the capacity building services. We believe we have to address this issue together with the agenda item 7. On one hand, while the fund for international assistance has been accumulating, on the other hand, voluntary contributions are reducing. Under these circumstances, donors will continue to question the need for further funds when there are unspent funds still available. The committee should consider a long-term approach to address both sides of the coin. We should look into the broader resource mobilization strategy of the Convention in the context of the structured financing dialogue that will be launched in the margins of the 204th session of the Executive Board, together with the underutilized fund of the Convention. We also need to look at the funding situation of the Convention as a whole to identify where the obstacles lies, what is needed to be done, how to address this irony. We believe that ad hoc working group could be mandated to analyze this issue. We need to know more about the funding system of the Convention, to analyze it and identify the procedural or any other sort of obstacles, and accordingly make some proposals for the committee to consider. In this regard, we will submit some amendments on this issue under agenda item 13. Regarding the two priorities in the report, as far as we understand, the first priority relates to the continuation of the complementary additional program, with more emphasis on sustainable development, which we support. With regard to second priority, we attach particular importance to formal and informal education for the safeguarding of ICH and its transmissions to future generations. Our Ministry of National Education has added a course in the curricula entitled Folk Culture, which embraces the principles set forth in the Convention for Safeguarding and Transmission. Our Ministry of Culture and Tourism has been registering the tradition bearers under different titles, providing for them to sustain their art through master-apprentice relations. Within this context, One Master, 1,000 Masters program has raised a substantive awareness and consciousness for safeguarding. The UNESCO Chair, Intangible Cultural Heritage in Formal and Informal Education, established in the Gazi University in 2017, has begun to work towards an enhanced and ICH-supported approach to the formal and informal education subjects through undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral education and museology studies. The Turkish National Commission for UNESCO, ICH Institute, and Gazi University has been organizing winter schools for ICH. With this perspective, we find this priority extremely important. In relation to its implementation, we know that field offices are those who are in charge of implementing the operational projects. In fact, the field offices have been empowered in many ways as a result of the delegation of authority decision of the DG. Although simplification of processes are welcome for the better delivery of the problem, close cooperation and coordination between the headquarters and the field offices are critical in terms of achieving expected results. Regular consultations is needed between the headquarters and the field offices from the first stages of planning to other stages of execution, monitoring, as well as reporting of the program and projects. With this understanding, we would like to be further informed by the Secretariat about the working relations between the field offices and the headquarters. Secondly, it is mentioned in the funding priority 1 that training and advisory processes may also include relevant institutes, NGOs, universities, and community representatives. We presume that those stakeholders mentioned in the report are those accredited to UNESCO. Finally, as we understood, this is the end of the complementary additional program that was relevant for 2014-2017. And in this committee, we're about to launch a new program for 2018-2021. We would like to know whether CAP has been successfully implemented and whether its outputs have been achieved. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Turkey, for your intervention. But once again, try to be as brief as you can. On my list, Cote d'Ivoire, Philippines, and followed by Austria and the Republic of Korea. I now invite the distinguished delegate of Cote d'Ivoire. You have the floor, Madame Ambassador.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais tout d'abord, Monsieur le Président, avec votre permission, remercier le secrétariat pour le travail qui est fait et pour l'exposé très clair qui nous a été fait. Je voudrais remercier au nom du comité, si je peux me permettre, les pays qui ont apporté des fonds, la Chine, le Japon, la Principauté de Monaco, la Corée, les Émirats, et on vient de nous dire également que les Pays-Bas promettent de nous donner des fonds. Monsieur le Président, je ne veux pas anticiper sur le point suivant, mais j'ai l'impression qu'il y a quand même une petite incompréhension entre ici l'insuffisance des fonds extra-budgétaires qui sont annoncés et le point 7 où on nous dit que l'utilisation de l'assistance est insuffisante, la sous-utilisation des fonds dédiés à l'assistance internationale. Est-ce qu'on ne peut pas imaginer une stratégie de compensation ou quelque chose à faire parce qu'il y a comme une contradiction entre ces deux points. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. Now I give the floor to Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We echo the concerns in the document and of other committee members regarding the declining level of voluntary supplementary contributions which often provide a lifeline for carrying out needed activities. We thank those states parties which have contributed in this regard. We support the two funding priorities, but like others, would appreciate more information on how these were selected. We would also like to flag that the committee, in accordance with its mandate set forth in Article 7D of the Convention, can play a more proactive part in increasing the resources of the ICH Fund. Some inspiration could be taken from the recent efforts of the World Heritage Committee to enhance the sustainability of its fund. The 1972 committee adopted a roadmap for the sustainability of the World Heritage Fund with indicative targets in short, medium, and long-term measures. Ideas such as a core group or group of friends on ICH and a donors forum may be worth exploring. For instance, there could be opportunities for ICH committee members working with the Secretariat and the underutilized extensive network of accredited NGOs to consider creative means to increase mobilization of resources. Such difficult situations need innovative approaches. Again, we see the informal ad hoc working group as a practical platform where such discussions can take place at minimal cost. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador, for your very constructive intervention. I now give the floor to Austria.
Thank you. Under item 5 of the agenda, we have discussed the activities and the importance of capacity building activities and for the implementation of the convention. And thanks to the dedicated efforts by the Republic of Korea and China, as well as Japan, the United Emirates, and now Netherlands and also Monaco, the work for intangible cultural heritage got an additional boost, which is indeed highly appreciated. However, unfortunately, we also have to note the trend to the decline in the resources mobilized for capacity building program. We think we have to be realistic in terms of our fundraising policy and prioritize our additional projects accordingly. Thus, we welcome the proposed two funding priorities, which are capacity building and ICH and education. What is particularly interesting about the latter is its link with the 2030 agenda. If already decided upon, we would be interested to know how many countries you envisage for participation in the second funding priority, and what the newly established clearinghouse for integrating ICH in education implies in terms of infrastructure, human resources, and functions. Let's hope the two funding priorities will be an inspiration for state parties to contribute accordingly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Austria. Now, Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. We would like to express our gratitude to State Party for making generous voluntary contribution for the implementation of the 2003 Convention. Especially, thank you, Netherlands, who recently decided to make a contribution. And we would like to echo to our colleagues from Turkey and Philippines. We also welcome two funding priority for the period of 2018 to 2021 entitled Strengthening Capacity to Safeguard ICH and Contribute to Sustainable Development, and Safeguarding ICH Informal and Non-Formal Education. We firmly believe that intangible cultural heritage represent value and practice that make us who we are, and it is of utmost importance for future generations to learn its value. In this light, we welcome the initiative to underline the importance of transmission by setting the priority on education. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Republic of Korea, and Hungary and Cuba. First, I give the floor to Hungary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I will be very brief since a lot has been said before. Simply to thank the Secretariat again for a very transparent reporting and a sobering picture at the same time. Hungary also fully supports the funding priorities put forward, namely capacity building and ICH and education. We are also grateful to the countries and the states that have given financial support in this last year. But we would also like to ask whether any attempt has been made to mobilize resources from the private sector. Indeed, this convention is gathering really large visibility and obtaining large visibility, but in the funding sources that we see, we only see states giving financial support. Has the private sector been called to support, and has there been any successful fundraising activity? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Hungary. Now I give the floor to Cuba.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je suis un peu perdue parce que ce débat que nous avons ici, c'est un peu disconnecté de qui nous vient d'adopter à la 39e conférence générale. Nous avons adopté un budget intégré qui justement parle des budgets ordinaires et aussi tous les fonds extrabudgétaires. Je voudrais savoir si le secrétariat peut m'expliquer un petit peu quelle est la projection qu'il y a concernant à ce sujet, comme sera l'application de ces budgets intégrés qu'on vient d'adopter à la conférence générale pour tous les secteurs, pour tous les compétences de l'UNESCO dans ces conventions, comment on va se réfléchir dans la réalité. Et nous sommes aussi d'accord avec les priorités et on veut remercier à tous les donateurs de ces conventions et de ces fonds. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Cuba. And from the Senegal. Okay, I recognize the distinguished representative of Senegal.
Je voulais m'associer aux derniers collègues qui ont proposé des mesures tout à fait peut-être jusque-là pas utilisées, envisagées. C'est peut-être innovant, c'est peut-être délicat, mais effectivement, pourquoi ne pas chercher du côté également d'un partenariat public-privé dans le sens de la mise en valeur de certains secteurs du patrimoine. Je pense que cela se fait déjà au niveau du patrimoine matériel. Est-ce qu'il y a une possibilité effectivement de l'envisager au niveau du patrimoine immatériel? De la même manière, la proposition faite par la Côte d'Ivoire mérite d'être, oui, approfondie. Est-ce qu'il y a des mécanismes qui peuvent permettre une réaffectation de ressources par rapport aux priorités? Si c'est le cas, la sous-utilisation de certaines ressources pendant qu'on a des préoccupations absolument indispensables à résoudre, est-ce qu'effectivement, il ne faut pas réfléchir sur des mécanismes qui permettent une réaffectation, une réallocation des ressources? Je pense que cela, à une situation exceptionnelle, des mesures exceptionnelles. Je pense que c'est un peu dans ce sens que je voulais intervenir de manière très brève et bien sûr remercier, exprimer notre gratitude à tous les donateurs. Merci.
Thank you, Senegal. And I see no more speakers from the committee members. I now give the floor to observer members. I give the floor to distinguished delegate from Japan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving us the floor to make a statement in our capacity as observer. First of all, we'd like to thank the Republic of Korea for hosting this committee. We also thank the Secretariat for the clarification of this agenda. About the two main founding priorities, we would especially like to welcome the proposal entitled Safeguarding Intangible Cultural Heritage in Formal and Non-Formal Education. We consider that this is very timely, as now in various fields, we are attaching much importance to policies which keep inside the SDGs. We intend to continue our cooperation with UNESCO and member states to contribute further to the implementation of the convention. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Japan. Okay, thank you. Let us move now to the decision. Please refer to document 06 and this draft decision in para 13. Can we see it on screens? May I ask the committee to adopt draft decision 12.com?
Because they asked us questions.
Oh, okay, all right, okay. You're taking up the decision. Yeah, I recognize the representative from Cuba and Palestine. Yeah, Cuba first.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je pense qu'on va un plus rapide, mais j'espère que le secrétariat peut nous donner quelques informations concernant les questions qu'on avait données concernant la projection des budgets intégrés et la perspective à l'intérieur de la Convention. Je pense que ça, c'est important avant de passer à la décision. Merci.
Okay, thank you. And Palestine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no problem with the decision, only with one paragraph in the decision. So if we can proceed paragraph by paragraph in order to address my concern in paragraph 6, namely. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, as Cuba asks some of the additional information and some of the answer from the Secretariat. Now I think, yeah, Mr. Tim Curtis, you can, yeah.
Thank you. I think there was a few questions, and some of them I noted. One, I think, asked by the Philippines, how we chose the two funding priorities. Another one on Austria, on the second funding priority. If I understood the question, it was how many countries it was meant to cover. Perhaps I didn't understand exactly. I think Turkey asked, was it Turkey that asked for a review of the capacity? No. One country asked for a review of the capacity building program and its result. And then there was the question by Cuba on the integrated strategy and several questions relating to private sector funding. First of all, the two funding priorities, one is a continuation of what has been continually stated as a priority by the committee members over the years, which is the capacity building program. We are now ending the period, so we propose to renew that for another 4 years, since what we have heard has been that this remains a continued priority over the many decisions of the committee over the past years. The second funding priority is a new one, and we are now proposing it to you precisely because both the interest in this area that has come through some of the formal but also non-formal discussions, the references to ICH and education in Articles 2 and 14 of the Convention, of the text itself in the Convention, are why we are proposing these two funding priorities. If I understood Austria's question on the second one, then I understand that the question is about how many countries are expected to be a $2 million target would allow us to work in. If I understand that's the question, our estimate is somewhere around 10. We expect projects, our target would be about 10 countries if we were to attain that funding. As to the review of the capacity building program, we have not been able to yet do formal review of the overall of all of it, but we have had several opportunities to do some kind of review. First, the iOS audit in 2013, which identified very clearly the capacity building program as a successful program and encouraged to continue and expand. Secondly, as I said earlier, two of the large extra budgetary funded projects did have their own project review mechanisms, so those are available. And finally, I think the question for Cuba concerns the integrated budget framework, which was recently adopted by the General Conference. I will let our administrative officer discuss the technical issues, except to say that we have tried to present these proposals within exactly that framework. But perhaps the administrative officer of the culture sector. There was a question also on private funding, which the director of the division will might be able to answer it afterwards. Thank you.
Oui, merci. Donc, concernant cette question de budget intégré, si vous avez remarqué au niveau du paragraphe 10 du document, on a déjà fait allusion à cet aspect-là. Et je peux vous assurer, parce que en même temps vous êtes État partie, mais aussi État membre, donc durant la préparation du 39C5, et spécialement donc on parle du scénario 518, qui est vraiment le scénario opérationnel. Pour la convention de 2003, il correspond au résultat attendu 6. Et pour le résultat attendu 6, bien sûr, on a tenu compte de tous les aspects. Le budget opérationnel, programme régulier, qui est de, on va dire, 2 700 000 pour tout le biennium, siège et hors siège, plus un montant de contribution volontaire de 14 900 000. Mais ce montant de 14 900 000 englobe aussi toute la globalité du fonds, du budget sous le fonds, y compris les fonds qu'on n'arrive pas à mettre en œuvre parce que c'est ce qu'on va voir au niveau du point 7. Donc, en un mot, le budget intégré a été appliqué. Nous avons tenu compte à la fois du programme régulier, des contributions volontaires et aussi il y a une estimation de gap qui a été faite pour arriver au montant global pour le résultat 6 qui correspond à la convention de 2003 et tout ce montant-là s'élève à 19 100 000. Alors, si vous voulez plus d'informations, peut-être on peut voir ça d'une manière bilatérale avec la déléguée du Cuba, si vous voulez plus d'informations sur les aspects techniques. Je suis disposé à vous les fournir. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted only to respond to the question on the private sector funding because, in fact, especially in the current funding and financial scenario, we have been looking very seriously at a variety of ways in which we can raise funding, and this has been ongoing, of course, for several years. And if I may, there's a link also with the communication tools that we have been working on developing in order to be able also to reach private sector donors and make it attractive for them to be able to support intangible heritage because for them to understand what it is they're funding is also important. But there is also an issue with the private sector funding that we have encountered very often, particularly when we are looking at a convention where so much of the emphasis is on capacity building and on something that is related to specific communities and so on, and also when it's related to a multi-donor fund. Private sector donors very often are reluctant to donate to multi-donor funds. They would like their name attached to a fund. They also would like to bring in something else, some components such as visibility for their own work or to give some exhibition or demonstration in a way that takes the intangible heritage element out of its context. So it's not very easy to retain the integrity of the convention's work and promote it in the way that the committee would like to. Along with private sector donors as partners. Of course, this is something we are working on, but just to flag that it is not as straightforward as one would imagine because of the kind of pressures that private sector donors feel in terms of such a partnership to be able to have their connections to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson, for giving me the floor. I think I need to give some clarification because, budget issues are always very obscure. And I know that among you, some people are very, very, proficient and expert on budgets, and others are not. And I can see a lot of, question marks in your eyes from the podium. So let me explain just very simply what's happening. In the past 2 years, UNESCO has decided to produce a new type of budget, which is the integrated budget. Integrated budget essentially puts together the resources that are under the regular program, based on the contribution of member states, and everything else that we can raise out in the outer world through fundraising operations. Why was this done? Well, I think it's very clear that there is an objective of transparency and coherence. Transparency with regard to the member states that set the priorities for the C5, for the program budget, and coherence in the fact that we try to put together and somehow show how the different fundings contribute to the priorities that have been established. That's the principle. And what you have seen, perhaps, in the new budget is essentially the first time that this has been done. Now, although this has been done, and in terms of numbers is there, I cannot say that it's fully finished as a process. In fact, this process is now supported by another process, which we call the Structured Finance Dialogue. Essentially, it's a way to entertain relationships with donors, so that they can see also, it's transparency versus the donors, they can also see what are our priorities and the way we operate. This structured finance dialogue, once it is fully achieved, will actually result in a very integrated budget. We are in the process, in the transition process. I don't think we have achieved yet full coherence between the different mechanisms, but this is the first time this is happening, and I think it's clearly directed in this direction. Now, that said, we have to deal with something that it's clearly a market for donors. The market is public or private. When we go to a member state and offer a certain product, we do a marketing for a product that is called the Intangible Heritage Convention, and we try to convince the donor, even if it is a member state, that this is better than another product that he can buy, excuse me for the term, on the same market, whether at UNESCO or other organizations. So what's really important is to define the object, the product that we market. And this is really an important, change, cultural change for the convention, for the cultural sector, and for UNESCO. We are doing it. I'm not saying that we haven't tried in the past years. I think we are quite advanced. And as I said the other day, our extra budgetary funds nowadays are bigger than the ordinary funds. We have I think 56 million for the biennium of extra budgetary funds and 43 of regular programs. So we are already over 60% of extra budget. But clearly it's not easy. It's not easy to go to a private sector agent and say, no, we have the fantastic product, the Intangible Heritage Convention, please finance it. It doesn't work like this. It works in a very different way. We have to convince both public and private operators that what we are doing is something that has a return from them. Now, clearly the return is different if you are a member state that is a member of the convention, because you have shared the objectives of the convention, you know what you talk about, and you know us, etc., etc. But if you are a private sector commercial operator, you want to see something in return. And this is what Mrs. Ogozagar was saying. There is a difficulty there because sometimes we do not find the proper match. We cannot sell the logo of the convention or the spirit of the convention to a commercial operator just because we need the money. So we have to find a proper adjustment. And sometimes this adjustment is not easy to find. I think we have done some progress. First in creating our own culture and capacities to address this issue, and also creating the interest and the motivation of the private sector. But we are a little still in the process of doing this, and it's not completely finished as a process. It will take time, and I think it will take a lot of goodwill and perhaps also a lot of support from your side. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Secretariat. And before proceeding to taking decision. Are there any further questions? I recognize the delegate of Cuba.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais faire référence à l'explication qui vient de donner Monsieur Vandaran. Et je voudrais souligner quelque chose. On ne peut pas mettre un prix à la culture. On ne peut pas parler d'un produit, on ne peut pas parler de commercialisation. Pour nous, ça, ce n'est pas le bon chemin. Parce qu'on ne peut pas privatiser ces conventions. C'est une convention des États membres, c'est un comité intergouvernemental. C'est bien qu'on doit mobiliser des ressources, qu'on doit travailler avec le secteur privé, mais sur les priorités de ces conventions. Et c'est une question qui doit être très claire. Je sais bien que vous avez essayé de mettre le plus clair possible toutes ces questions concernant les budgets intégrés, que ça présentait à tous les États membres comme la grande solution de l'UNESCO. Je ne suis pas sûre, mais je pense qu'on doit être très vigilant de quelques questions concernant ces commercialisations, les produits, parce que je voudrais répéter, on ne peut pas mettre un prix à la culture. Merci.
Thank you, Cuba. Any further comments on the part of the Secretariat? No, okay. And any further questions or curiosities on the part of our committee members? Ambassador Anastas, you have some proposed amendment or some general comment?
It is general comment with a precise amendment, actually, both. Can I proceed? Well, thank you. Actually,
yeah, anyway, Ambassador Anastas, we are now talking about before proceeding to taking decision, just limit yourself to just a general comment.
Well,
okay, thank
it
you.
is general comment, not on what has been discussed for the moment. Actually, I have a general comment regarding the structure of the decision itself. So, in the decision, we have a paragraph that I think it's in another item. So when you come to the decision, I will take the floor again. Thank you.
Okay, let us proceed para by para. Okay, on the screens. Para 1, citing the document we have examined. Do I see any objections? I see none. Adopted. Para 2, recalling the article of the convention that gives us the prerogative to accept the earmarked voluntary supplementary contributions to the fund. Are there any comments, objections? I see none. Adopted. Para 3, recalling our previous decisions. I see no objections. Adopted. Para 4, I imagine there are no objections to congratulate the People's Republic of China for its generous offer to organize the open-ended Intergovernmental Working Group for the development of an overall research framework for the convention. I see none. Adopted. Para 5, expressing the concern over the small number of new voluntary supplementary contributions to the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund. I think we all share the same preoccupation. Are there any objections? I see none. Adopted. Para 6. Okay, I see Ambassador Munir of Palestine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I have a small problem with this paragraph because it will come in item 11C. So I'm wondering if we really need to have it here. I think it's out of the subject. The subject is it's much more related to 11C. So my proposal is to delete this paragraph from this decision. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Palestine.
The reason that this paragraph is in here is because this has been requested by the committee previously. And since it hasn't been received, we have to report in the reporting on the fund that we haven't received it. Notwithstanding that substantively, it belongs also to another one. But financially, we have been requested to do something. We never reported it, so we are reporting that it has not been received. So from a budget point, we're reporting a non-reception of what has been requested.
Okay, Palestine.
Well, thank you, Chair. I understand now the scope behind it. Of course, it's clear. But I'm wondering, in that case, we take note that we didn't receive the needed fund to cover the costs of the open-ended intergovernmental working group on this issue, which is the removal and transfer from one list to another. And this is something that we need. And you know that this is on the table since the 10th session in Windhoek. Well, now I'm wondering, in that case, we are taking note and we have concerns that we have no fund for this open-ended working group. And I'm asking, in that case, why don't, on exceptional basis, if we don't receive funds from donors, why not to use the fund on, I'm saying on exceptional basis. This is the question, and in that case, it could be reflected, because you see, on exceptional basis, we will use the fund for something else in item 7, and we are not against. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Palestine. And before giving the floor to Zambia, followed by Cuba, I think Secretariat will answer directly to your question.
That decision can only be made by the General Assembly. The committee doesn't have the authority to decide on the use of the fund for that. So that would have to require a recommendation of the committee to go to the General Assembly. We don't understand which part of the fund it would come from. The reason we have it here is the original decision also gave a date for reception. So when we get a request for an open working group, we say to be received by this date. Since the date passed, we have reported that the date has, in this sense, we are reporting the date has passed and the fund did not come. But this committee cannot request the fund from, cannot activate the fund in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Zambia,
Chairman.
Cuba, Turkey. Now first, Zambia.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Being our first time to speak at this session, we would like to begin by thanking and congratulating the Republic of Korea for hosting the 12th session of the IGC. We thank you so much for the wonderful reception arrangements that we made to make our stay in Jeju as comfortable as possible. And then secondly, we would like Zambia to congratulate Mr. Byung-Hoon Lee for being elected as chair of this session. And then we would also want to congratulate Mr. Tim Cadis and his team at the Secretariat for the quality and volume of work that they have done during the reporting period. We are particularly happy with your conscious effort towards developing partnerships with education institutions to support the implementation of the safeguarding measures mentioned in the Convention. This is a very good approach because we believe it's a guaranteed way of ensuring sustainability of ICH safeguarding interventions. Now, I would also want to thank UNESCO for the continued support that enabled most of us from developing countries to participate in these conventions, these meetings, which would have otherwise failed to attend. So we really thank you very much, UNESCO, for that. Now, we were raising our hand on a point that has been already adopted, but we thought maybe we could find paragraph 5 above there. We thought we could maybe refine, instead of saying, expressing the concern over the small number of new voluntary supplementary contributions. I do not know whether we are concerned about the voluntary supplementary contributions or we are concerned about the amounts. I don't know whether it's reading very well, because I was going to think of to be concerned over the dwindling amounts or the lower amounts coming from voluntary supplementary contributions, not the new numbers, because even if we retain the same odd numbers, if they're willing to increase the amount of contributions, I think it will still be of significance to us. So I thought maybe we needed to come out clear. Our objective is the money. Whether it comes from 10 people or 100 people, the objective is the money. I don't know whether I'm correct in that regard. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm very grateful to distinguished representative of Zambia for his very kind words of encouragement addressed to me. And I now give the floor to Cuba and followed by Turkey.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Nous avons l'impression que ce paragraphe limite un peu les droits de ces comités aussi de créer des mécanismes pour la négociation intergouvernementale. De plus en plus, il y a des mois de temps dans les comités, dans l'Assemblée. Il n'y a pas beaucoup d'espace pour faire ces processus de négociation qui demandent beaucoup de temps qu'un ordre de jour, comme d'habitude, dans une réunion de cette nature. Et pour ça, à notre impression, il y a une double intention dans ces paragraphes. Et pour ça, je voudrais savoir si ces paragraphes, c'est pour couvrir une responsabilité du secrétariat parce qu'il n'y avait pas consulté l'Assemblée ou pas, parce qu'on ne peut pas limiter les droits des États membres de se rencontrer, de travailler sur une question qui est très importante. Sinon, on doit chercher des solutions en session avant du comité, 1 ou 2 sessions avant de l'Assemblée générale et mettre l'écoute sur l'organisation de ces réunions parce que ça, c'est une organisation intergouvernementale et on doit faire les débats et on doit réfléchir. Pour ça, que je ne comprends bien l'intention de ces paragraphes au fond. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, thank you, Cuba. Now I give the floor to Turkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From the explanation of the Secretariat, I understand that this is more of a procedural nature. So the committee, in its 10th session, asked the Secretariat to report on this, and that's what the Secretariat is doing now. Would it help if we can make a reference to the committee decision at the 10th session in Namibia? Maybe that could be a way out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Turkey.
Yes, indeed. I think Turkey has exactly identified the issue, that this is a response to a specific request and a report on a specific request that was made by the committee. I think that would make it clear, and that's what we're trying to do. Thank you very much. Just to clarify. Of course, in no way closes the possibility of a new funding appearing. It's just to respond that during the period which was identified during that time, we didn't receive funding. It doesn't mean there cannot be new funding.
Okay, now I recognize Colombia and Palestine. Yeah, first I give the floor to Colombia.
Well, we think that if we are going to talk about the to give any budget for the removal of an element from one list or to transfer one element from one list to another, we first have to debate how is it going to be in the point for number 14. So why don't we make first that debate, and then in that point, I don't know if it's possible, but we can just talk about this aspect of the budget. So if maybe the committee makes the exception, so for the point 14, we can talk about this budget thing in that point. But right now, we cannot make this decision if we haven't discussed about what does it mean to change, to transfer an element from one list to another, how we can remove one element. So we cannot decide that now.
Okay, thank you. I think it's the Secretariat can react.
Again, please, I'd like to be very clear. The item here is reporting that we were asked to raise funds during a specific period, and we didn't raise funds. It is not cutting off any request to raise funds or any possibility to do another intergovernmental working group. That means in Namibia at the 10COM, the committee asked us to organize an open-ended working group on the transfer of an element from one list to another, subject to the reception of extra budgetary funding by January 2017. We did not receive any extra budgetary funding by January 2017, so we are reporting it here. Under item 14, there is another request for extra budgetary funding to continue an open-ended working group. So one does not delete the other. I think, let's be very clear. This is a reporting on the past. It does not stop any request for another extra budgetary funding for an open-ended working group. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Secretariat. And Palestine and Guatemala. So I give the floor first, Ambassador Munir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, in that case, Palestine withdrew the request to delete the paragraph, but maybe we can add a small amendment in the sense that has been mentioned by the Secretariat, which means in case of absence or no supplementary voluntary contributions received prior to the next General Assembly, the committee may recommend to the General Assembly to authorize the use of the fund on exceptional basis for this purpose, which means the organization of an open-ended intergovernmental working group to settle the issue of transfer and removal. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Palestine. Now, Secretariat.
Just my point is that fund would have to come at expense of something, such as international assistance, expense of implementation of the convention. The standard in this convention has always been that open-ended working groups are to be subject to extra budgetary funding. If we start setting the precedents, to be quite frank, we'd be using more money that should be designated towards operational sides of the convention for continuing more and more meetings, because that is the suggestion. It has always been the practice that open-ended working groups should be subject to extra budgetary funding and not to the fund. We already use almost all of our regular program. Almost all the regular program goes to doing statutory meetings, plus now the money that is meant for an operational side of the convention will be swallowed up by more statutory meetings. That is my comment on the proposal. Thank you.
So, Ambassador Munir, do you agree with the explanation given by Secretariat?
Almost, actually. I do partially agree that it is true. Maybe we will make a precedent in that case. But we know that we need absolutely to have a debate on this issue. There is no mechanism for the removal or the transfer, and there are no text in the operative directives. So in that case, maybe instead of requesting or recommending the General Assembly to authorize on exceptional basis, maybe just we can send the question to the General Assembly to reflect on it and to find a solution, because we need absolutely to have a debate on this issue. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you for this time. Before giving floor to Zambia, I think your Secretariat has something to add.
I think if we look at item 14, this is an item reporting on the past, okay? So, in fact, it wouldn't even belong here. I think this discussion should happen under item 14, where there is already a draft decision requesting extra budgetary resource. I don't believe it belongs here, which is reporting on the past. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Zambia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I heard Mr. Tim Curtis' explanation about the paragraph 5. I agree with the intentions of the paragraph, except I thought it was focusing more on the number of new voluntary supplementary contributions. So I was thinking it could still retain the same meaning if we said expresses its concerns over the small amount of funds received from voluntary supplementary contributions to the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund to support the programmatic framework of 2014 to 2017. I thought it would read to focus more on how much money was coming in than on the new number of voluntary supplementary contributions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Zambia. But we are now talking about para 6, and para 5 was adopted, even though there are some ambiguity. So regarding this, Secretary, you can add up?
No, my response was in relation to paragraph 6, not paragraph 5, sorry.
Okay, let's continue. It's Turkey followed by Senegal. Yeah, Turkey first. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I just wanted to support what Mr. Curtis has said. I think the issue of transfer, we acknowledge that it's an important one and we need to debate, but we should debate it under agenda item 14. So we need to keep here the para 6 as it is, but maybe in order to clear the confusion, Secretariat could read the decision 10-19, the relevant para, so that it is clear for us, for all the committee members, this is in response to that decision, this para 6. Thank you.
Paragraph 10. Okay. Paragraph 10 of decision of the decision mentioned there decides to convene an open-ended intergovernmental working group to be held before the 12th session of the committee to discuss draft operational directives on the procedure for the removal of an element from a list and the transfer from one list to the other. This meeting will be organized on condition that voluntary supplementary contributions to the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund. I'm sorry for the interpreters if I'm speaking very quickly, but I'm reading. And it continues with the standard. The point is, it says, decides to convene an open-ended intergovernmental working group to be held before the 12th session of the committee. We are at the 12th session of the committee. We did not receive any funds, and so we are reporting here that we did not receive any funds. And this is why the draft decision says the committee regrets it did not receive any funds. The question of whether the committee wishes to request more funds will appear under agenda item 14. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Senegal first, and followed by Algeria. So, Senegal, you have the floor, sir.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais quand même suggérer, si c'est possible, qu'à la discussion de chaque point, pas qu'on ne s'écarte pas, mais ici c'était dans le cadre d'un reporting. Et dans le rapport, il y a des activités sur lesquelles Monsieur le Secrétaire nous a dit ce qui a été fait, comment ça a été fait. Et dans ce point précis, c'était une activité prévue qui n'a pas pu se tenir faute d'une contribution. Mais je ne sais pas, il y a des questions importantes peut-être sur le transfert, mais c'est à un autre niveau. Mais si on doit rester sur... on sort un peu du cadre de ce rapport, parce que ça c'était un rapport, et sur le rapport, il dit ce qui a été fait, ce qui n'a pas été fait et pourquoi. Pour moi, c'était vraiment simple et on aurait pu quand même dépasser cette question. Et si vous voulez, arriver maintenant au point 14, on va discuter sur, le problème de transfert. Mais on prend beaucoup de temps peut-être sur cette question-là. C'était juste pour une suggestion par rapport aux questions à venir, qu'on ne s'écarte pas trop sur les éléments sur lesquels nous avons à discuter. Merci beaucoup, avec tout le respect bien sûr que j'ai pour les points de vue exprimés par les collègues. Merci.
Okay, thank you, Senegal. And Algérie.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président. Loin de moi l'envie de continuer de débattre sur ce point. Je souhaiterais plutôt vous suggérer, après avoir entendu les uns et les autres les explications du secrétariat, d'adopter ce point dans son ensemble, si vous le permettez, Monsieur le Président. Étant donné qu'on a répondu à toutes les questions et que la référence a été faite à la 10e session de ce comité, je pense que maintenant on peut adopter ce point et avancer vers le point suivant. Je vous remercie.
Yeah, thank you, Algeri. But for the sake of clarification, Nassim, your proposal is we will adopt the whole decision as a whole at this moment,
Yes,
or para by
yes,
para?
Yes, sir. We adopt the whole decision since we are talking about only reporting. We understand that this is reporting, so let's adopt all the decision and move to the next item. Thank you.
Actually, the whole decision is not reporting. You need to approve the 2 spending plans, just to clarify. So there is an approval, that's all.
Para by para.
Yeah, para by para. Oh, sorry, Ethiopia and Cyprus.
Yeah, I see Ethiopia and Cyprus. Yeah, I give the floor to Ethiopia first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just would like to echo what the distinguished delegates from Senegal have said, to recite how we came to the decision at TEMCOM. We had a case, I think it was from Vietnam, I remember, an outstanding case, and follow up to the debates and discussions we had held with Vietnam. We wanted to understand the case of transfer of items, and we recommended by then, for those of us who were there in that committee, we recommended for more expert meetings and deliberations, and we recommended, the Secretariat by then had asked where the funding would have been, so extra budgetary funding was recommended. And on this decision, it's just a follow-up, as the Secretary have very well explained, it's just a reporting on this paragraph 6. So I really don't see why we don't come to a consensus and an agreement just to pick up the way it was reported. We had recommended the Secretariat to do an exercise, and this decision basically reflects what have been done in the last 2 years. So I just wish for distinguished delegates to consider this and proceed as recommended by the Secretariat, and we can do the discussions, detailed discussions on the way forwards on item 14 as scheduled. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ethiopia. Okay, and after giving the floor to Cyprus, let me close the debate on this item, Afghanistan. Okay, Cyprus and followed by Afghanistan. Cyprus, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. C'était pour appuyer mon collègue d'Algérie, mais simplement, on peut adopter le paragraphe tout de suite et continuer, parce que de toute manière, on va parler paragraphe 8 de la décision 14 sur ce groupe de travail. Donc, je pense qu'il faut continuer maintenant le travail. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Cyprus and Afghanistan.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc, je suis d'accord avec l'idée que ce paragraphe pourrait rester, mais si on pouvait l'alléger encore, je ne verrais pas d'inconvénient. Par exemple, le mot, pour que ça ressemble effectivement à un rapport à la non-réception d'un fonds qui devait être reçu. Par exemple, on pourrait encore alléger, reformuler de telle sorte que, par exemple, aucune contribution volontaire supplémentaire. Le mot supplémentaire ou supplementary, par exemple, pourrait disparaître. On n'a rien reçu, donc pour faire court un message. Et aussi, si ça peut faire ressembler ce message à cet esprit, par exemple, n'a encore été reçu ou have yet been received pourrait apparaître vers la fin de la phrase plutôt qu'à cette partie. Merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Ambassador of Afghanistan. And you want to respond to?
Je voulais juste clarifier que supplementary voluntary contributions est un mot technique spécifique. Et c'est pour ça qu'on l'appelle comme ça. Donc on dit supplementary, qu'il soit élégant ou non, c'est le mot technique et spécifique qui correspond à la décision antérieure. Merci.
Okay, thank you, dear colleagues. We almost reached the consensus on Para 6. So if Ambassador of Afghanistan, if you agree, we'd like to adopt Para 6 amended by Secretariat as it is. Is there your comment?
Monsieur le Président, je n'ai pas de commentaire. Si c'est la formule figée qu'il faut garder, je ne vois pas d'inconvénient à le garder.
Okay, thank you. So, can we adopt Para 6 slightly amended by Secretariat? Are there any objections? I see none. It's adopted. I suppose the committee is happy to thank all the generous donors that supported the convention since its last session. Para 7. Any comment? I see none. Adopted. Para 8 contains two related points. The first one is to approve the two funding priorities for the period 2018-2021 as presented by the Secretariat, and further explained in Annex 2 of the present document. The second one is to accept any future voluntary supplementary contributions received within the scope of such funding priorities and authorize the Secretariat to make immediate use of those funds. I see no objections. Adopted. Para 9, encouraging state parties to further support the convention through voluntary supplementary contributions to the fund and the sub-fund. As the chairperson, I would also personally like to encourage all donors to contribute to the fund through these two mechanisms, as the financial situation of our convention is particularly worrying. Are there any objections? Am I going too fast? It's adopted. Finally, the standard closing para 10, in which the Secretariat is requested to make a progress report at our next meeting. Do I see any objections? None. Adopted. We have now adopted each of the paragraphs, and we need... Oh, Turkey. Okay, I recognize the distinguished delegate of Turkey. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a general remark. As I stated in my statement, we want to see a resource mobilization to be discussed within the ad hoc working group, but with the understanding that we will make an amendment to under the agenda item of ad hoc working group, item 13, I believe. We have not proposed any amendments here with that understanding. I just wanted to make sure with the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Turkey, for your very constructive intervention. And I see...
Is Zambia still... Zambia is asking for the floor?
No, Cyprus first, maybe.
No?
No?
Zambia. I see Zambia, the plaque.
Okay, Zambia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paragraph 10, I don't know why we want to restrict it to 13th session. I was going to say that the Secretary reports at subsequent sessions on the progress in the implementation of any voluntary supplementary contributions it may have received since the last session. Subsequent sessions, I don't know whether there's a reason why. Yeah.
Perhaps you'll allow me to explain. This is a standard. Each session we push to the next session and we cite it so specifically. So we will say, you know, the 13th session, and in the 13th session it will say the 14th session, so that in fact we are actually bound to that session. Otherwise we could skip a session. So this is a way of making sure we do it at every session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have now adopted each of the para, and we need to adopt the decision as a whole. Zambia, you want to take floor? No, I don't think so. Seeing no objections, I therefore declare decision 12.com 6 adopted.